Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's that time again. Yes, it's me being pedantic about stuff I come across on the telly and places like that, places of mainstream spewage. This edition of Spewage Detection concerns aqueducts, and in particular this one crossing the River Dee in Wales. So, the reason why I'm kind of using this high-tech method of presenting you these extraordinarily important educational snippets of information is because I think it just needs to be highlighted, and it really to remind myself more than anything else, because this is a sort of nonsense that my daughter's learning in her textbooks and exercise books is at school. And it gets pretty frustrating when they're told about how the Romans built something, this, that, and the other, or some sort of genius architect or engineer. There always seems to be one in every country. We have our Brunel, Isambard Kingdom, Brunel, who seem to have built everything in this bleeding country. And the other countries have them all as well, don't they? They're pendants to that, to fill their relevant history books with pretty much the same nonsense that ours is filled with. Anyway, getting back to this. So this is an aqueduct, like I said, and this was supposed to have been built in 1805. Let's take a listen. Bear that date in mind and ask yourself, what questions would you ask yourself if you're hearing a date and then you look at a structure? Are there some anomalies that crop up, or not anomalies necessarily, but are there things that you might think to yourself, well, you know what, I'm going to look that, and that up just to see if that even makes sense or not. Let's have a listen and see what they say. Yeah, I'll just put that question out there. I've got used to asking those questions now, but it's taken me a while to get my head around it and realise, actually, it's pretty much everywhere. Let's take a listen.
In 1805, nobody had ever done anything like it. It was new technology, never been tested. The iron trough, that was new.
Right, see, we've hardly got started and already I'm pausing it. So, new technology. I was just about to coin a phrase of Professor Brian Cox and change the wording slightly. The actor that we use in England to pretend he's a scientist. Well, but they're talking about new technology here. Now, why would anybody ever try out new technology in reality for the first time? You just wouldn't, would you? I mean, that's like sending a spaceship out into space without having tested it properly on Earth. You know what I mean? I mean, who would the right mind? Oh, actually, we have done. Oh, never mind. But this here is supposed to be new technology. Right, okay, fine, fair enough. They had new technology, goody gumdrops. Right. Then you've got to ask yourself, okay, built in 1805, let's have a look and think about how you quarried that rock out of the ground that's made of, because that aqueduct is made of a lot of stone, right? And of course, you start figuring out, what they used, certainly towards the Industrial Revolution. That would be the mid-1900s. That's another 35, 40 years to go until after this bridge was built here, before that kicked in. So you didn't have any hydraulic cranes at all, because they were introduced, for example, mainly, well, the hydraulic machinery, according to official sources, they were mainly used for as waterside equipment, really, rather than wheeling them around villages and stuff like that. So, so a lot of these cranes were used for docks, to work on docks, of course, to get goods from the boats out onto the land, or vice versa, from land onto boats to transport them. Yeah, makes sense. But actually to use them in heavy industry, in general terms, that didn't happen until the late 1900s, early 20th century. That's the way it is, and you can look up all sources and it will tell you exactly the same thing. It would tell you about crane systems that were introduced hundreds of thousands of years BC by the Greeks, of course, that old chestnut. If you can't think of anyone else to attribute it to, just mention the Greeks or the Romans. Be like mentioning gravity, isn't it? You just got that get out clause all the time. So that's what they do on that one. But actually that is not the case at all. The Industrial Revolution is most definitely the key in all of this, because they didn't have this heavy industry. They didn't have this heavy equipment, right? So you got the problem of the cranes. They wouldn't have existed at all, because this thing is high up. She'll explain in a minute how high it is. It's a couple of 100 feet. And also the problem with quarrying the rocks out of the ground. Well, we know that dynamite was invented in 1867 by Mr. Nobel. So if this is built in 1805, well, they preceded dynamite by 62 years. Where have we heard that before, again, about being told about something before the events actually happened? It escapes me. Some date somewhere. Anyway, another anomaly. See, it's all connected. So you got that. So that was the point I was making earlier, was about, how, these dates, they all seem to overlap, but they're all filled with ambiguity, and it's all a bit sort of, they lose their track here or there, and they're difficult to kind of pick up again elsewhere, and then there's a gap, or they'll contradict themselves in the same sentence in some of these books or some of these sources, right? But I just thought I'd point that out, because this is the stuff that's going in your exercise books, and your kids are reading it and learning it. And that is where I have my beef. Let's continue.
That was made here, and the joints of the trough were bound with good Welsh flannel, dipped in boiling sugar, and when they came to be looking at restoring it and refurbishing it for the bicentenary, the joints were still sound.
Amazing, absolutely amazing.
Even today, this is an extraordinary piece of engineering.
I know you're going across in the boat tomorrow, and everybody should cross by boat, but it might be good if you just check it out first. So I think we should just walk out on the towpath a little bit so you can get the feel of it. Are you ready?
No.
Yes, I will. Well, come on.
Okay.
If you're prepared to do it, I'll follow
Come on.
you.
Yeah, all right then, I'll lead the way.
Come on then.
This is water from the river. The river's below, and this water was taken out with the Horseshoe Falls.
So is it, what, so it's pumped in?
It's gravity, it's
Gravity.
just gravity flow, yeah. It doesn't go very fast, but you can see it is moving.
Yeah.
And there's fish in it, now and again.
It is quite a drop.
It is, it is.
Now, if that was an exceptionally long aqueduct, let's say in the form of a canal, let's say the length of the Suez or the Panama Canal, or let's shorten them even. Let's use the Bedford Canal, for example. Does that stretch of water at some point bend somewhere? It must do, mustn't it? Could that be another fib? Who knows? Anyway, let's continue.
Look at this.
You've got the river crossing under the canal. You've got the old bridge from 1661, and over by the...
Did you hear that? An old bridge from 1661. There you go. The desire for bridges, and especially stone bridges, must have been, I mean, the demand must have been sky high with all that new automobile technology that was kicking around in 1666, or 1661, sorry, a few years before. Well, that was at the same time that England was dying of Black Death. But then we do get saved by a great fire in 1666 in London, don't we? Because some baker's stove couldn't handle the heat. But yeah, that's a nice little snippet there, wasn't it, from a 1661? Okay, let's continue.
There, you've got the railway viaduct.
Ah, right.
That's the railway viaduct.
Oh, look. And should we not mention this aqueduct? Oh, at the other end of town there's a railway viaduct. Well, looky on here. The plot most definitely thickens. And who on earth built that? And how did they build that? I mean, looking at that terrain right there in front of you, it would be humanly almost impossible to transport that gear, that equipment, that machinery, and then all those rocks and stones and everything else that you had to do to get it to the site, to then build it all and all that sort of stuff. I mean, you just imagine it. Imagine it, having to clear the area just to get to the place where you want to build it. What were you doing that with? Now, I know Da Vinci painted or drew helicopters and stuff, but I mean, this is taking a biscuit. Come on. Let's listen on.
Of course, that was the beginning of the end for the
Yeah,
canals.
that's ironic,
Yeah.
isn't it? That it should be
Yeah.
within sight.
Well, yeah.
Well, it's in sight, young sir, because they were never meant as rail or water carrying bridges, were they? Not like that, they weren't. Because we certainly did not build them. And I'll tell you why. Where are the construction photos? For example. Oh, yeah. Round about the time the photography was invented. Isn't that a coincidence? Oh dear, and of course back then you hardly had cameras, so a lot of that footage would have gone missing. Where have we heard that before, that important data goes missing that's supposed to symbolise an important moment in mankind's history? Don't know, something rings a bell there. Anyway, let's continue watching.
Well, you know, we collected a lot of stories from people who lived around here, and they're definitely true stories. If you lived over there in Rongazachti, when you were going to secondary school was over here, and the kids had to come across to get the train to school. But if you were coming on the towpath and a boat was coming towards you, well, the boats were pulled by the horses, and the horses filled the towpath, so you either had to go back till the horse had passed, and then you'd be late for school, or the kids used to just get hold of the bars, squeeze through, hang on the other side till the horse had passed, and then come back in again to get to school. And between...
So, brave kids as well as genius engineers in that region, and probably the greatest food on earth. They also have the bravest kids. Don't you just love these little local programs? They're just great. But anyway, I mean, look at that. How did you build that? They go deep into the ground, those things. And that rock has to be brought out of the ground in the first place before you even cut it to size and all the rest of it. Well, what equipment did you use? What did you use? What tools did you use to do that? Never mind the metal cladding on the top and all that. That can all be put in afterwards to make it look a bit Industrial Revolution-esque. But, you know, and you have loads of these dotted around England, by the way. There are some down here in Wiltshire, down the area where I live here. Near all the watercress fields, there's quite a few of them around that area. All made of bricks and stuff like that. Again, well before brick factories were made and all that sort of stuff, yet they still had them up. Impossible. Literally impossible. Anyway, I thought I'd bring that to you. It's gone over the time I wanted it to. It's gone into 12 minutes now. But it's just interesting and fascinating that when you look at stuff like that, it leads you straight into certain things that you can easily look up and then just work it out in your head. Well, that simply doesn't make sense. You know, and things like the Industrial Revolution, things like the invention of TNT or dynamite, even the use of gunpowder. I nearly said black powder because that's what they call it in German. But anyway, even the use of that sort of stuff, they weren't using it for that. You know, and all the other types of explosives that they came later. So the key really is your mid-19th century, and anything that was built before that that's massive, that needed blowing out into smithereens to get it out the ground or anything like that. Question it. You have to. Because it would have simply been pretty much impossible. Anyway, so that on that note, I'll bid you all farewell. Thank you for checking in. And speak to you all soon. Some of you sooner. Ta-ta for now. Bye-bye.